Hello and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I am curious about AI. And when I say I'm a journalist, what I really mean is I'm a writer. So right away at the jump, I want to cop to some very deep bias for this episode. As a writer, when I first heard about CHGBT in Gen AI, my first thought was, this is some serious bullshit. My opinions on it range from, this is not going to be any good. No computer can replace the soul of a human writer. And I also then later thought, oh shit, this might be able to be really good and this will replace me. And maybe I only have like 5 months left in my writing career. So I've since come to believe that neither one of those viewpoints is really the way to think about AI in writing. Instead, there's sort of a secret door number 3. And that brings us to today's guest, Dr. Mushtaq Bilal, who is a writer and an academic. He is more specifically a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Southern Denmark. He's also co-founder of Research Kick, an AI tool that's designed specifically for folks in academia doing research. He frequently writes about using AI for writing and academic pursuits on Twitter, X, and LinkedIn. He's fairly influential in that space. And in our conversation, we get pretty deep in how he uses AI for writing. And one thing I think is really instructive about this conversation is it's not quite what you might think. He doesn't say, hey, AI, Claude, or ChatGPT, write this for me. Well, that is part of the process, but that is not the complete process. It's more for structure than you might think. It's more for idea generation than you might think, or idea critiquing than you might think. He also uses it to help be a critic of his own work. And I was very impressed in our conversation how he effectively writes not just one draft, but many, many, many drafts using AI as effectively a partner, but he is still doing a lot of the work as a human. And it is absolutely, at least in my opinion, still more than fair to call him as the author and writer of his works. As you'll see, ultimately, he is the one putting pen to paper. The AI is merely a helping partner earlier in the journey and might help him identify blind spots. While he is focused primarily on academia, it is very easy to see how this framework, this approach, this mindset applies to writing of all types. So if you never ever do any kind of writing in your work, or really any kind of creativity in your work, if you never write any emails, any marketing copy, any notes to a manager or your team, if you write 0 words, then I'm not going to lie to you. This episode is not for you. Don't waste your time. I don't think you'll get much out of it if you never write anything. That said, virtually most jobs in this day and age that have at any point you're next to or using a computer, you probably have writing in your workflow of some flavor or variety. And if so, I think you'll find his approach to using AI to help writers extremely useful. And as he says deeper in our conversation, in many ways, it's not about replacing the human writer. It's about helping making good writers great writers, and giving you one more tool in your toolbox, to use an overused metaphor and cliche. But he also has built an AI-infused tool for those in academia that sounds widely useful for streamlining research. And I learned a lot. So with all that, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Mushtaq Bilal. Mushtaq, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in with how you are using AI to assist with writing and maybe how you're doing it in ways that might surprise folks.
What I try to do is I try to use ChatGPT or generative. I've been using very less ChatGPT these days because now I've moved on to Claude, like many many others,
Mm-hmm.
because Claude is a lot better in terms of understanding how text works. ChatGPT has a very fixed kind of understanding. Claude is a lot more flexible, and um, you know it understands text better. So what I last year when I started on ChatGPT, I follow this. I follow someone on Twitter, Rob Lennon. I don't know if you follow him, but he still does. He works on really long prompts, and he did a thread back in January of last year on how to write different prompts for business use cases. And I looked at his thread and I said, okay, so I can adapt these kind of things for an academic audience. And I wrote a thread back in February of last year, and that thread went like ultra viral, like 8 million views. And that and in that thread, the first thing that I had written was that a lot of people are using ChatGPT or want to use ChatGPT, but they don't use it smartly. So what is a smart use of ChatGPT? So the smart use that I wrote about back then, and I still believe that, is that so ChatGPT uses a predictive model. So all generative AI models, they use a prediction sort of model. They will figure
Mm-hmm.
out a word. They will, you give them a word, and then they will try to predict the next word possible, or the word preceding. What's the most likely word that is, what's the word that is most likely to come after a certain word. And of course they
Right.
do it at a very 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 high speed. But it's basically this: they are predicting the next word in a sentence, and then next sentence, a following sentence, a sentence that precedes.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, it's a prediction model. And the text that ChatGPT gives you, and you may have heard a lot of people say this: oh, this ChatGPT text sounds so bland, it sounds, there is no personality to it. And that is because it is a very predictable text. The model uses a predictive feature. And so what I figured was that writing, any piece of writing, has two components. One is the content of the writing, like whatever we are talking
Mm-hmm.
about here. So that's the content. But the most important, again, going back to my PhD and my literary training, you know
Mm-hmm.
the most important thing you want to focus on, if you're a literary scholar like me, the most important thing you want to focus on is the form of writing, and not the content.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Mm-hmm.
me, a Twitter thread doesn't matter what's written in the thread. Of course it matters. If you don't have content, nobody would read that.
Right.
But for me, the form of a thread or a form of a social media post matters a lot. So it's the form that hooks you. That's the first thing that hooks you. And so
Yes.
in that thread I wrote that we can use ChatGPT smartly if we use it to structure our writing and not to generate our content. So if I have a lot of content, I can use it to organize and structure my writing. That would be a
Mm-hmm.
smart use. So for example,
Mm-hmm.
one of my most favorite use cases is that if I feel sort of, if I am having, facing the writer's block, or if I'm just
Mm-hmm.
lazy, in general. So what I do is I open a Word document, and I start dictating, and I
Mm-hmm.
start talking to myself, or talking to my Word document.
Are you literally, so you're literally speaking, you're dictating, you're using kind of microphone transcribing as you're speaking?
That, yeah, that is correct. I mean, I used to do that, like recording in the old thing. And I'm, back in the day, I published a book of interviews. So I have that old, every journalist
Yeah.
has that. Yeah, but now MS Word has a feature, inbuilt feature where you can just press the dictate button and you can just dictate it in, simple English.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so you have writer's block and you have a blank page and you just start with no pressure. You just start almost chatting to yourself. And then what happens next?
Yeah, so I just talk to myself, and this is what I would call thinking. I used to call it thinking through writing. So I would start writing on notebook, whatever I'm thinking,
Hmm.
and that would be a very meta kind of process, that I'm thinking about doing this, but it doesn't occur to me, so I'm worried about this, and I don't know what to do about this. And then, two sentences in, I would write myself into the problem and figure out what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
That's a very useful way of doing it, and I still do that. But it's a lot more efficient. You open a Word document and press dictate button and start talking to Word,
Hmm.
talking to myself.
Yeah. And I think it takes less, there's something
Yeah.
about just talking that feels less scary than typing. And it's almost when there's, as every writer knows, there's nothing scarier than staring at the blank screen or a blank page. We're all filled with dread,
That
right?
is true.
But when you don't have pressure to like, oh, what will I write? When you're just like, I don't know. Well, I know how to freaking talk. I'll talk all the time. When you're just
Yeah.
talking, there's less of that blank page dread phenomenon. So I love that approach. So what happens next? So you're thinking through writing or thinking through talking. You kind of dump out, if you will, it's almost brain dump that eventually appears in Word as text, even though you've spoken to it. What then do you instruct Gen AI to do to kind of help instill some order into this chaos?
Yeah, exactly. That's very well put. So what I do is I take like short paragraphs, like one page of like 450 words, or a chunk of text, not paragraphs, because there is no paragraph at the moment. So I take that, copy into ChatGPT or Claude, and I write a simple prompt that please remove redundant words and phrases from this and make it coherent and cohesive. And so it gives
Mm.
me a very well structured sort of piece. And I do this multiple I can do this with the whole document, but I try to work incrementally with generative AI. And
Hmm.
I also use this incremental prompting. And when ChatGPT OpenAI came out with their prompting strategies, they also had this, for in GPT-4, that you start with a simple problem and then you increase the level of difficulty. So I would take a chunk of text and then run it through ChatGPT with smaller portions, and at the end of it, say for in 10 minutes, I would have a very neat kind of first draft. I used to do that initially, but then I made when ChatGPT introduced custom GPTs and Claude introduced these projects. So the first thing I do is I make a project or a custom GPT. So I call it 0 to 1, like 0 to first draft. So when
Hmm.
I'm speaking into an MS Word file, that's my zero draft. Nobody has to see it. Nobody needs to know what I'm thinking. And I used to take it used to take me like quite a lot of time and effort from to move from zero to the first draft. And all that time, I can do that in a very short amount. I can do that in like 30 minutes or so.
Well, a couple of very quick clarifying questions. First, can you, for listeners out there who might have bumped on the phrase custom GPTs, can you quickly describe and elaborate what that is and what that allows you to do? And then, secondly, um, I'm fuzzy on after you do this kind of almost stream of conscious brain dump verbally that is then transcribed into Word. I heard two things. I heard you say that you ask it to clean things up, remove redundancies, make it coherent, but also heard you say that you this is the phase when it helps you add structure or add to your back to the idea of content and form. You provided the content in a very raw, kind of soupy, raw stew way. That's the content. And now you're asking for help on creating the form. So, when does the structure component, do you specifically ask it, help me? Like before you ask it to clean things up on redundancies, do you ask it to, okay, here are all of my raw thoughts on topic X. I'd like you to please suggest a compelling structure. Um, but first, let's go for custom GPT. Let's start. Let's start there, and then I'd love to hear a little more about the kind of sequence of how you do things.
So custom GPT is a feature in ChatGPT. It requires a paid subscription. Once you subscribe to GPT-4, you will be able to do this. Make custom GPTs. So essentially, what happens is that custom GPT is sort of a small. Think of it as a small version of ChatGPT that you build yourself or design yourself for a very specific task. So, for example, I have a custom GPT in which I took Plato's Republic and I uploaded that into GPT, into a custom GPT, and I asked the custom GPT, gave this prompt that you will talk to me about Plato's Republic like a teenager, and you would use all the internet slang that they use. So I want to so the experiment was that I want to introduce Plato to a high school student, high school class, and I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, bore them to death. So they can ask Plato questions in their language. So this Plato, this GPT talks about, hey, what you vibing with, and hey,
Just as
you
Socrates
know,
did, right? That's exactly how he spoke back in Athens. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. This seems sus, So I don't know. I mean, I'm not very up to date in internet slang.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
My
yeah,
son
yeah,
would be much more.
yeah,
But like things like no cap or hey fam or
yeah,
bruh, these kind of things. So
yeah.
I programmed it. Of course, it took a few iterations for it, and then I called it the sassy Plato.
This is actually how you appeared on my radar. I believe this Plato's GPT of yours went a bit viral on Twitter, and
Hmm.
that popped up on my radar. It's so meta, right? Because the irony is you're instructing ChatGPT you're using in a very Socratic dialogue fashion, which literally is what Socrates is doing in the Republic. So
Exactly.
that's incredible.
This is one use case. I mean, and then whatever you want to have, say you're a chef and you want it to have you want a chatbot that is very familiar with, I don't know, Midwestern cuisine, or I don't know, South Asian
Mm-hmm.
cuisine. So you can take a lot of material and, yeah, upload there, and then you can write a prompt. Of course, it will take a few iterations for you to get it there. But once you do that, so custom GPT will be a small little version of GPT that you can use for a very specific purpose.
For listeners out there who might be envisioning some kind of business component here,
Hmm.
am I right that you can, in the same way you fed in Plato's Republic, and so basically merged the extremely large body, the ocean of data that is ChatGPT, and then you said, now add the Republic, and then have it interact with people of all different languages, including different vernaculars, to access the Republic. You can, if you're a company that sells bicycle helmets, you could feed in all kinds of like your document. Maybe you have some branding guide. Maybe you have 50-page little manual about the specs of your helmet, about here's the 7 awesome features of my bike helmet. Here's the a 10-page report on how safe it is, right? So you can kind of give this additional content about the bike helmets, and then have this custom GPT is kind of a blend of the larger world that ChatGPT knows plus your specific biking helmet content, and it could use, and then it could do things for you in the future. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that is correct. That's a very well put interpretation of retrieval augmented generation. Yeah, RAG.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like we have an LLM like ChatGPT, and then we use a PDF or a, whatever text we have or whatever
Mm-hmm.
document we have, and then we use attach this document with the LLM, and ask LLM to use this as a source and to answer our questions. So this is a very very interesting use case. The only thing that I would caution against is that since we are using LLMs, there could be hallucinations. So now
Yes.
I'm using Plato's Republic because I have read Republic, and I am familiar with not all of it, but I'm familiar with the text of it. And if it
Mm-hmm.
makes a wild claim, so I would know that the LLM is hallucinating. Although you
Mm-hmm.
can instruct the LLM to not make up stuff, but you cannot really trust it because again it uses a
Right.
prediction model, and hallucinations can be limited, minimized, but they cannot be eliminated, at least in these models. So this is a very similar thing that happens in Claude also. So you can build
Mm-hmm.
any, you can build for, if you're running a business, you can build a custom GPT to get your employees on board, or you can get
Mm-hmm.
you can build a custom GPT to understand the legal code. You want to rent a building, or you want to, you can use custom GPT, build a custom GPT to understand a tax code.
Thank you for indulging me down this kind of tangent about custom GPTs and getting us kind of winding back to our main thread. You were saying that you create custom GPTs to help you um, organize thoughts, structure thoughts, and then kind of hone the writing. And I'd love to kind of unpack that a little more. Back to
Yeah.
my kind of a bit of confusion on when getting back to the original process of dumping things into Word and then using generative AI, first ChatGPT, later Claude, to help you transform to a metamorphosis from this kind of like unorganized thoughts into finished prose. What was first? When did you ask about structure versus redundancy of words and helping kind of like polish in the form?
On the level of first draft, I usually ask it to sort of, remove redundant words, make it coherent, and divide the whole text into paragraphs of 200 to 300, 250 to 300 words. So that's
Mm,
like a good chunk of text that, a 300 word paragraph works well within a research paper, but 300-word paragraph doesn't work for online reading. So online reading,
right.
I usually, I usually break them into two sentences. I don't write a paragraph longer than two sentences. Rarely will I write a paragraph of three sentences for online reading.
Hmm.
But what I do is, so here is something that people may misunderstand. So I have a raw text, and then I run it through chat gpt and get it polished. And many people will assume that I will take that first draft and publish it, and I will not do that. That is, if you're talking about my academic research, then I will
Hmm.
probably publish the 10th draft, you know and by
Hmm.
the time that I write the 10th draft, or maybe 15th draft, um, you know everything would have been changed.
It's so interesting. Can you walk us through some, maybe not all 15 drafts, but what are the types of things that you iterate in your drafts? And I'm guessing for listeners, this can translate to whether it's academic writing or marketing copy or a
Hmm.
leisure pleasure writing. I imagine that a lot of your principles will apply across different types of writing
Hmm.
and functions. So I'd love to hear about, you create your first draft. What are some ways you nudge it to improve? And what are the
Hmm.
types of prompts you use?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer it for the two types of writing that I mostly do. So one is academic writing, where I'm writing academic, prose. That gets dense, theoretical, And so what I do is, so I've written a first draft, and then
Hmm.
I have a first draft from ChatGPT, and now I have something that has a semblance of what I would like to say. I may not want to say this exactly, but it's a good starting point. And then I will
Yeah.
write the thing. I will write like 20 pages of whatever is organized. Now it's a lot more. Once you have the structure down, once I have the structure down, like, okay, so these are two sections. Within two sections I have to talk about XYZ, and in this ABC, then I get much more comfortable. Then I know that I
Hmm.
can produce 300 words of academic prose in one day, and it will take me 20 days or whatever. So I get the first draft down, and then I share it with my colleagues. I send it out for reading, for critique.
Quick clarifying question. When you say you write, so you have ChatGPT or Claude write this first draft, and then you said, "Now I'm comfortable. Now I can see the roadmap. You can see the structure, and cool. I need 300 words of X Y Z." Do you then take that first draft that the Gen AI wrote and then ask Gen, when you say yours a second draft, is a second draft something that Gen AI takes a stab at based on your feedback? Or are you saying that you then have a blank Word document like on the side and you are writing yourself as far as like literally typing out words, but in the other, I'm visualizing on your computer screen, you have like one window open that's blank Word, and next to it on the right you have Gen AI's first drafts, and as you write, you're confident because you're informed by what almost like a guideline, a cheat sheet that Gen AI gave you. So the writing goes much faster for you. Which of those two frameworks are you doing, or is it both, depending upon the project?
Usually what I do is, when I have a first draft, I will print it out and I will look at it.
Hmm.
I will have it on my desk, and then I will open a new document and start writing from scratch. Usually this
Got it.
happens on the level of first one, two, three drafts. By the time I'm at on my third draft, I know I have a fairly good idea of what is working in the draft. So what I do is,
Hmm.
by the time I'm on second draft, or I have something reasonably structured, I can use ChatGPT then to ask for critiques. So I can ask it to, hey, this is my argument now. And what I do is, I will upload a couple of papers of scholars whose works I am engaging with. And so, for
Hmm.
example, David Damrosch or Franco Moretti, I'm engaging with their work, and I will upload their paper, and I will ask ChatGPT, okay, so this is a paper by Franco Moretti, and this
Hmm.
is my draft, this is my argument. Now, tell me how Moretti would critique my work. And so
Interesting.
that gives me a critique that is not by Moretti, but that is a close approximation of Moretti. Now I cannot go and ask Franco Moretti in Stanford, hey, critique my, two paragraphs. He doesn't have time for this. But ChatGPT can do that in a matter of minutes. And so what that does is, it tells me my blind spots, or if I'm misreading Moretti's argument, or if there is a
Hmm.
potential objection that I can preempt. So by the time I'm at second draft or third draft, I have something that is reasonably structured, that makes a sort of cogent argument, and then I send it out to my colleagues. I don't send out, it's unfinished, but it's not like totally rough. It's not like
Hmm.
totally unprepared, or it's the argumentation needs to be, the argument needs crafting still, of course, but the text is not unpolished. The text is well written, the sentences are well written, they
Hmm.
make perfect sense. The paper is formatted very, appropriately. And then when I get the feedback, the human feedback, then I rewrite the whole thing again. But by the time by
Oh
by
wow.
this, like fifth draft, I know like the start is working well. Okay, so let's keep the start. You don't have to write the first two pages again, type them up. So the first two pages are working. And so, let's see what's not working. And then again, whenever I have to send out my paper for critique, I ask ChatGPT to tell me what kind of critique can I expect. And I try to
Hmm.
eliminate those, preempt those critiques first. And so by the time my colleagues give me critique, their critique is much more sort of, substantial. Nobody's saying, there are 10 typos in, paragraph two,
The low hanging,
but
right, the
people
low
don't.
hanging fruit critique has already been accomplished, right?
Yeah,
So you're not wasting their
that is
time with
true.
the easy stuff. Yeah, I love that.
That is
I'm
true.
in just brief interjection in that I'm guessing I love your approach of uh, asking to identify blind spots, asking for critiques. I would think again that would translate to many types of writing. If someone is writing a business proposal or a pitch deck to investors or to VCs, I could imagine asking, "Hey, what are the ChatGPT pretend instead of pretending you're this academic colleague or scholar, say pretend you are an extremely smart venture capitalist who is very picky about what funds to invest in, what questions would they ask, what blind spots would they identify, so you can kind of like get some free feedback in that respect. I think it's really smart. So how would you say? I'm very impressed, frankly, at the rigor that you are going through. It's people assume back to where we started of you saying people assume, hey, ChatGPT, just write this for me, first draft done. Like actually, no, it's more of it's a tool that you're using throughout a much larger, longer process and methodology. Would you say your approach now is it how much time did it used to take you to write a paper and how much time does it take you now with ChatGPT? And then is there any way for you to kind of judge the quality of the paper? Is it
I can answer it in two ways.
opinion in
So
your
one is
unbiased
that,
opinion, of course?
yeah, yeah, yeah. With me, my writing habits were formed and sort of cemented before ChatGPT. So I have.
Sure.
If you tell me that you don't have Mushtaq, there is no such thing as ChatGPT, or OpenAI is shut down, or everything is closed down. So my habits are still, like I'm assuming yours too. We have our writing processes figured out, before. So, and because I knew what was working in my process, I chose ChatGPT or Gen AI to optimize certain stages of the process. I'm still doing the same kind of rigorous academic research, but
Mm,
for some certain, like for example, I'm a non-native speaker of English, and if I'm writing academic prose, I sometimes you're like, okay, I don't know if this sentence is grammatically correct, or if this construction, what's something that's very often grammatical mistake, hanging something, dangling
dangling modifiers.
dangling modifiers. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So I mean, you're writing, you're free writing, you don't worry about dangling modifiers, or sub clauses, or full stops and commas.
Right,
But
right.
you can use this, and you can ask chat gpt, like, or Claude, I'm thinking this, can a native speaker does a native speaker of English use this construction? So I don't have to look it up in like 10 volumes of, I don't know, Oxford English Dictionary, or look up all
Hmm.
those correct usages. So Claude can give me very quick feedback, and so within that certain writing process, certain stages that I know, that I'm confident, that are sort of low stakes, I
Hmm.
optimize that in terms of time and efficiency. A lot of people think that using chat gpt means cheating on writing, and that is the biggest problem that I want to, or sort of the biggest misconception I want to tell people. And I think most of my threads that go viral, or that are well received on social media, are the ones where I'm making a case for for our smart use of these. apps. So for example, like you said, that there is a business, and they have to say they want to be GDPR compliant. So GDPR is like one of the biggest, it's a very thick volume of laws. So are you going to read all of that? What are you going to do? So, you're going to hire somebody, hire a lawyer. And if even if
Hmm.
you hire a lawyer, you won't know what kind of questions to ask them. So it's sort of a very good, tool to get you started. It's of course not a
Hmm.
replacement for human thinking, but it's a very good tool for making you think in the right direction, and that too very quickly. So for my process, I mean, I'm a very slow writer in terms of academic writing, but in terms of Twitter writing, what I do is, or online writing, I try to write every day. So, and post every day. And that's now sort of a habit. So what I usually do is I write the whole thing, because I know what kind of, and because I started writing on Twitter back when it only had 240 characters. If you look at my previous, Twitter posts, or if you just scroll through my Twitter timeline, you will see that I write very lengthy sort of, and very technical sort of tutorials of how to use Zotero to automate your citations in a research
Hmm.
paper.
Hmm.
Nobody would, outside of academics, nobody wants to wants to learn that tool, or read that thread, which is perfectly understandable. But you're writing that thread, and you have to stay within the word limit. So chat gpt would really help me. I mean, I don't use chat gpt in that case, but I use chat gpt or ai powered tools in certain other platforms, like typefully has this generative ai tool built in. And so I can, and there's a tool, I don't know if you use that, word tune. So, I
Hmm.
would write a hook or the headline of the thread or a tutorial, and then I would run it through word tune and ask it to, how do I shorten it, how do I make it punchy, how do I condense it, does it make sense? So it's like, I would spend like 3 hours writing a whole thread, and then I would spend like half an hour just writing the first two sentences. So
Hmm.
if I don't have sort of generative AI, then it would become a lot more. It would take a lot more time.
What are some of your favorite prompts and favorites, things, favorite prompts to ask Claude or ChatGPT to either begin writing from scratch or improve writing, whether it's to change tone, make something that's formal more casual, or vice versa? What are some of your favorite tricks and prompts you use?
My most favorite prompt is, it's not sort of a prompt, but it's like a series of prompts. So
Hmm.
what I would say is my most favorite way, or my most, the the prompting technique that has given me the best results is, like I mentioned earlier, incremental prompting. So whenever I start anything, um, this is my understanding that because ChatGPT and generative AI have been trained on human generated data, they have some sense of how human beings respond. So if I meet you on this, you're walking down the street, and I say, hi Jeff, how you doing? And that's a very nice, polite way of starting a conversation, rather than saying, seeing you, and the first thing I say, hi Jeff, I can't make tomorrow's meeting. And you'll be like, okay, okay, it'll be difficult for you to process first
Right,
things,
right.
right out the gate. So the first thing I do is I always ask Claude, ChatGPT, I'm going to do XYZ, can you help me with this? And then ChatGPT
Hmm.
says, okay, yeah. So for example, I'm thinking about writing a research paper on how Hans Christian Andersen stories were read during 19th century in colonial India. So
Hmm.
I'm working on this topic, can you help me brainstorm research ideas? And they would, chat gpt or Claude would say, of course I can help you. And then I would be like, okay, so I'm working on Hans Christian Andersen within 19th century India. Tell me how female readers read Anderson stories. And so now,
Mm.
now ChatGPT would give me a very, very useful, interesting, response. Rather than, going off the bat, straight out the gate, you say,
Hmm.
hey, I'm doing this research. Tell me what kind of research question I should ask or, answer. So it's sort of, if you do it incrementally, you get a lot more nuanced and refined sort of, response.
Interesting. Do you have, what's your specific process like? Do you have a notepad somewhere? Because I'm guessing it'd be tedious to repeat these again and again. And I'm guessing you have a similar process that you reuse quite a bit. Do you have like somewhere a document with like a bunch of different questions that you then just kind of use as a template and just tweak a bit each time? Or do you start from scratch?
No, no, I have a document. I prepared a document. I wrote down all the steps, that these are the steps. And of course, that document also needs to be revised very often, because whenever there is an update to the model, or, there is 4.0, 4.0 mini comes
Hmm.
out, then, some things change. But at the end of the day, what it boils down to is, if you the more you interact with the model, the better you will be in terms of figuring out what is working for you. And this is the, I run these webinars and workshops also for academics, and this is the most important thing that I emphasize, that if you do not use the model yourself and you expect me to give you sample prompts, they will
Hmm.
work, those prompts will work best for me, they might not work best for you. So, you can take my
Hmm.
prompt, use it as a starting point, and craft your own prompt. That would be the best way to go about it.
One of many things that are interesting about your work is how many different phases in the writing process Gen AI is useful. If I hear you right, it sounds like it's been useful in overall brainstorming to help refine your concepts. It's interesting. It's effective in structure. It's effective in cleaning up the prose. It's effective in providing you feedback and critiques and identifying blind spots. It's effective in cleaning up the format, even. Am I right to synthesize that it's basically useful in virtually every single phase of the writing process, including ones that folks don't often think about?
That is true. That is 100% true. I would just add one thing. So, I used to, back in the day, I used to used to work in the Navy, and we had a very famous saying that the gun matters, but the man behind the gun matters more. So,
Hmm.
the tool matters, ChatGPT matters, but the person using the tool matters more. So, if you are a
Hmm.
smart person, like I was really impressed with this student I was talking to yesterday, they use chat gpt so in that's such a genius use case, and they were able to draft a really good statement. They were able to ace their interview, even though they were like, hey, my GPA is not good, my GRE score is not good, but they ended up writing such a killer statement of purpose, like research statement,
Hmm.
that the interviewers were like, okay, we cannot reject you, it's so good. And it's not
Hmm.
that they used ChatGPT to write for them. They used ChatGPT as a brainstorming partner. And in the absence of ChatGPT, they would have had quite a tough time. They would have
Hmm.
had to rely on human feedback. And, I don't know about you, but human beings are very unreliable when it comes to meeting deadlines.
Absolutely. Last couple of questions for you before I let you go. Talk about the importance of specificity in prompts and in being precise about what you're asking it for. I think one reason I ask that is I think in my experience, when folks have tried kind of half-heartedly to ask ChatGPT to write for them, they get some kind of generic output, and like, well, that kind of
Hmm.
sucks because I'm guessing the prompt is actually quite generic. They will just not give a lot of direction on who the audience is, what tone you want, how formal the language should be, and on and on. And that if they'd spent more time on being precise and then maybe also giving comps, like right in the style of this type of writer, or maybe even feeding it, in the example you gave before, perhaps even feeding it some of your colleagues' papers or your own prior paper to say write in this tone, right? So, long-winded way of asking is, can you talk about how important, if I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, how important is it to be specific and give a lot of guidance on what you want to avoid this kind of like mediocre or generic outputs?
Yeah. So back when ChatGPT was very new in 2023, I wrote a short tweet and I said that if you are an average writer, ChatGPT can make you a good writer. If you are a good
Mm-hmm.
writer, ChatGPT can make you a great writer. But if you are a non-writer, ChatGPT cannot make you a writer. That is the
Hmm.
problem. You know, if you are an expert and you know how to use ChatGPT smartly, your output, your productivity will increase manifold. If you're an expert, if you're a non-expert and you think that ChatGPT or AI can make you an expert, no, it will not. So that is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have when it comes to AI. And so to go back to your question about specificity, if you're a writer yourself, and any writer who writes professionally, or who makes a living as a writer, I don't know about you, but the first thing somebody like me asks is always the word limit. You want a piece, how long should it be?
Hmm.
1,000
Mm-hmm.
words,
Mm-hmm.
1,200 words, 800 words.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing, because you want to start with the limitation, because limitation is a very, very useful way of structuring. So, I have 800
Yep.
words, and, I can say only this much within 800 words. So you try to make every single word count. In that, there has to be no fluff, unless you're writing a fluff piece, which is a
Right. Right.
different
Right.
case. So you don't want to have any fluff on your writing, no fat. And if you are a proficient writer, you would very easily realize that um, you know that the prompt that you give, if it's not specific, you're not getting any specific output. Or another way of going, or answering this question could be that you can start with a sort of a vague prompt. But if you're a good writer, you can start with a vague or non-specific prompt, with the idea that you will niche down incrementally. You have to be very intentional about it. I can start with a vague idea, but again, this will only happen if you have a very good understanding of your own writing process, and if you are a decent enough writer in your own right. This will only happen then. If you don't know writing, and if I don't know writing and I start using chat gpt, that would be I would only get very generic responses.
So tell me about the app that you've created and what it's used for and what folks are doing with it.
Oh, yeah, wonderful. So, what we are doing is we have an app that's called Research Kick. And the way it started was that a little while ago, I used to use this app called Elicit, and they had a brainstorming research questions feature, which they killed for some reason. So I asked, quite a few of my colleagues in the ed tech space that, hey, can you make this feature? Can you build this feature? And they were like, hey, Mushtaq, nobody wants this feature. Illicit killed it because nobody was using it. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
no, 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 I was using it. So they said that they're not interested, doesn't make sense. And then out of sheer frustration, I asked one of my colleagues on Twitter, I want to make this app. Do you want to come with? And he was like, yeah, let's do this. So we made this app. We started with a very simple and single feature. So it's an app that helps you brainstorm research questions and find research gaps. So, for example, you want to work on a research topic, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So you want to figure out if this question has been answered in published literature or not. But published literature is
Mm.
like hundreds of papers. So you don't want to read 1,000 papers before you get started on your project. I mean, a lot of people actually do this. I mean, we did this. We would read like for during our PhD we had exams. So you would read like, I don't know, 50 books, and then you would take an
Hmm.
exam and justify that your question has not been answered. That sort of madness. So it's a lot. I mean, it's good training, good rigorous training, but as you can imagine, it takes a lot of time. And when you're a professional researcher, sometimes you have deadlines for grants, and you have deadlines for fellowships. And so your
Hmm.
funders would not wait for you to finish reading all the literature. So we build this app that helps researchers find research gaps, and we integrated ChatGPT with academic databases, Semantic Scholar, PubMed, and Cite. And we are in the process of integrating critical clinical trials, not critical, clinical trials database also. And most recently, we expanded this we expanded its features. So now we have a newer plan in which what we've done is we have taken all these frontier models of LLMs like GPT-4, Claude 3.5, and Gemini Advanced. We have taken all these models and put them in a single interface along with these academic databases. So, for example, you want to use ChatGPT, but you don't want it to hallucinate and give you fake papers. So you take ChatGPT and
Hmm.
integrate it with, say, PubMed or Semantic Scholar, and you don't need any coding or anything. It's just a couple of clicks. You just select the model, you select the database, and now your ChatGPT is like, think of ChatGPT as if it has a PhD. So now ChatGPT will respond to all your questions with reference to published papers. So hallucinations are minimized in this case. And then you can build any number of AI powered assistants. Whatever you think of, whatever problem you have for academic writing, you just give an assistant that role, use the appropriate databases, integrate the model of your choice, and get cracking. And if you buy so my co-founder said that, Mushtaq, how many subscription do you have? And I said, I have ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. And that's like more than $60 a month. And he was like,
Hmm. Hmm.
we'll make this app so that you spend at least half the amount. So so now we have an app that within our app, I can use all three models for $30, which is half the price of all these models combined. So I'm very happy, because
Love it.
I'm a good use I'm a happy user of the same app.
Well, sir, thank you very much for being so generous with your time, your wisdom, your experiences. Really, I've enjoyed over the past year or so. I've enjoyed following your work and reading your threads, and I've learned quite a bit from seeing how you've been experimenting. You've really done a lot for the space to help educate. So thank you so much. Appreciate it, and we'll keep following your work. Thanks again.
Thank you for inviting me. It was lovely to chat with you, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Thank you again to Dr. Mushtaq Bilal, who you can find on Twitter, X, LinkedIn. I'll have a link to that and all that in the show notes. Check it out. He is a great follow. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks as always. Usual housekeeping request. If you have not done so already, please consider subscribing to AI Curious on Apple or Spotify. We're also now on YouTube, so you can drop me a line there in the YouTube comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.